The bikers snickered at George Clooney, calling him a pretty boy actor who'd never been in a real fight. But the moment they swung at him, they realized this wasn't a movie set, and they'd just messed with the wrong man. The diner had seen plenty of rough types, but tonight felt different. The Iron Serpents, a crew of leather-clad men with road grime on their jeans and beer on their breath, had claimed the back booths as usual. Their laughter was sharp and cruel, the kind that makes people stare at their plates and pretend not to hear. Betty, the waitress, kept her head down, her focus on refilling coffee cups, praying the night would end quietly. But trouble was already brewing. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out, his boot tapping against the stool where a younger waitress stood frozen. "How about a smile? It ain't right to serve a man without looking him in the eye." She flinched, her hands clenching the coffee pot like a shield. Jade, the crew's leader, leaned back with a smug grin. "Maybe she's got nothing to smile about," he said, his voice like gravel. "Or maybe she thinks she's too good for us, huh?" Laughter, thick with cheap beer and bad intentions, filled the diner. The girl tried to step away, but Jade was faster, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist. It wasn't a hard grip, but it was a clear message. She wasn't going anywhere. That's when the door swung open. A gust of hot highway air rattled the sugar shakers on the counter. The chatter died down as heads turned. George Clooney walked in. He moved with the effortless grace of a man completely at ease in his own skin, a quiet charisma that drew every eye in the room. The years had etched fine lines around his eyes, but they only added to his charm. His worn leather jacket and boots looked like they'd seen 1,000 miles of road. He slid off his sunglasses, ran a hand through his salt-and-pepper hair, and took a seat at the counter. A whisper went through the room. "George Clooney." Jade's grin faltered. "Oh, hell," one of his men muttered. But Jade wasn't one to back down. Not in front of his crew. He pushed his chair back, its legs screaming against the tile floor, and stood up. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "A damn movie star gracing our humble establishment." Clooney didn't look up. He just picked up a menu, his expression calm. Jade sauntered over, a beer bottle dangling from his fingers. "You're George Clooney, right?" George let the silence hang for a moment before looking up, a faint, disarming smile on his face. "So I've been told." A few nervous chuckles came from the other patrons. The young waitress slipped away from the biker's grasp and scurried into the kitchen. Jade didn't seem to notice. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Though it was clearly a demand, George turned a page of the menu. "Actually, I do." The air in the diner grew tense. Jade's jaw tightened. He'd been dismissed. "Now hold on," he said, pulling out the stool next to Clooney anyway. "It's not every day we get a celebrity in here. We should get to know each other." Clooney finally set the menu down, his eyes mused and unimpressed meeting Jade's. "I'm just trying to get a quiet meal." A pause. Jade's grin returned, but it was ugly now. "You think you're too good for us?" he pressed, leaning closer. "Oh, shh." Didn't answer. He simply signaled to Betty for a coffee. That was what did it. The complete lack of fear. Jade had built his reputation on making people flinch, on men backing down. This man, however, barely seemed to notice him. The bikers started snickering. "Looks like Mr. Hollywood doesn't want to play," one of them jeered. "I heard all those fight scenes are fake anyway," Jade said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "No real fighting in the movies, is there?" George took a slow sip of the coffee Betty had placed before him. He was too tired for this. Had been a long day of travel, and all he wanted was a burger and some peace. But some men just don't know when to quit. "Ever been in a real fight, Clooney?" Jade pressed. "Or is it all just clever editing?" Clooney leaned back, finally giving Jade his full attention. A silence fell over the diner. "Son," he said, his voice quiet but carrying a sharp edge, "you've got two options." He nodded toward the door. "You can walk out of here," he said, then tapped the counter, "or your friends can carry you out." The diner held its breath. Jade gritted his teeth. He couldn't back down now. "Is that right?" he sneered. Then he reached out and tipped over Clooney's coffee, the dark liquid spilling across the counter and onto George's jeans. "Oops," Jade said, his voice oozing fake innocence. "Guess you're not as quick as you look." A hush fell. The biker stared, waiting. Clooney sighed, slowly picking up a napkin to dab at his pants. No rush, no anger. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. Jade's smirk twitched. He hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted. "What's the matter, old-timer?" T pushed, leaning in. "Cat got your tongue. Maybe I should teach you some respect." Finally, Clooney lifted his gaze. His eyes, now void of their earlier amusement, locked onto Jade's. There was no anger, just a calm, steady intensity that made a man reconsider his life's choices. "You should clean that up," George said, his voice low and even. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a statement of fact. Jade blinked, then let out a sharp, barking laugh. He turned to his gang, throwing his arms out. "You hear that? He wants me to clean it up." His boys laughed, but their chuckles were forced now. Something about George Clooney sitting there, completely unfazed, had taken the fun out of the game. Jade turned back, his grin tightening. "You've got some nerve, old man," he growled. "Maybe I ought to knock some of that Hollywood charm right out of you." He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the silent diner. George didn't flinch. "You don't want to do that," he said, as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. Jade puffed up his chest, his crew stirring behind him. Betty took a hesitant step forward. "Jade, don't. Just let it go." But Jade wasn't listening. "What's it going to be, Grandpa?" he sneered. "You scared yet?" A faint flicker of a smile touched Clooney's lips. It wasn't amusement. It was something colder. "Scared," he echoed. "Not even a little." The air crackled. For the first time, Jade hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, a dawning realization that he had profoundly misjudged the situation. But pride is a powerful thing. He leaned in, his voice a low, menacing whisper. "Then let's see what you've got, old man." The stage was set. The diner felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. Jade saw an aging actor, past his prime. George Clooney knew better. The years might have given him a more distinguished look, but they hadn't dulled his instincts. A storm was coming, and George was ready. The air inside the diner had shifted from restless to electric, like the quiet just before lightning strikes. What was once a place of casual chatter now felt suffocating. Jade loomed over George Clooney, his smirk gone, replaced by something meaner. He didn't like being brushed off, especially by a man he'd written off as a Hollywood lightweight. Betty stepped forward again, her hands gripping her apron. "Jade, honey, don't start anything. This is a place for people to eat in peace." Gave George a quick, pleading look, but he wasn't the one pushing. Jade waved her off without looking. "Relax, sweetheart. We're just having a chat. Ain't that right, Grandpa?" He turned back to George, sneering. The iron serpents laughed from their corner, the sound grating in the tense quiet. George didn't answer right away. He calmly folded the napkin he'd been using, set it down, and then, with an unhurried deliberation, rose from his stool. It was a simple movement, but it carried an unexpected weight. Jade and his crew tensed, their cocky grins faltering. There was a confidence in the way George moved, an easy grace that didn't match the stereotype they had in their heads. He stood just a bit taller than Jade, his face still calm, his presence now filling the space. "I didn't come here looking for trouble," George said, his voice steady and low. "But it seems you did." The words weren't loud, but they landed with the undeniable weight of truth. Jade's jaw twitched. "You think you're funny, old man?" he growled, stepping closer. "I've taken down tougher guys than you without breaking a sweat." George tilted his head, a ghost of amusement in his expression. "Tougher," he mused. "Maybe." His voice dipped, sharp as broken glass. "Smarter? I doubt it." The remark hit like a slap. A flush of red crept up Jade's neck as his crew let out a chorus of exaggerated oohs, fanning the flames. It was about saving face now. Jade rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles. Betty tried again. "Jade, enough. Don't make me call the sheriff." Jade just laughed. "The sheriff? You think I care about him? This is my town." He turned back to George, jabbing a finger at his chest. "And I'm about to teach you a lesson. Around?" The diner chairs scraped as the rest of the bikers stood up, slow and deliberate, a clear, unspoken threat of numbers. A murmur went through the other patrons as they started quietly paying and heading for the door. Betty stood frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped the counter. George didn't react until he finally shifted, stepping closer. His gaze flicked over the bikers, then settled back on Jade. His voice was low and even, carrying no fear, just quiet certainty. "You don't want to do this." A beat of silence. "You and your boys might not like how it ends." Jade let out a sharp, hollow laugh. "What, you gonna hit me with your Oscar?" The bikers joined in, but the laughter was stretched thin. Even they could feel the shift. George said nothing. He took another step forward, close enough that Jade could see the cool intelligence in his eyes, the kind of look that makes a man question his choices. The laughter died. That wasn't the face of some pampered actor. That was something else entirely. For the first time, Jade felt a primal instinct screaming at him to stop. But he was in too deep. His fingers curled into fists. "No way I'm backing down," he thought. The diner held its breath. The hum of the neon sign outside was the only sound. George exhaled, slow and measured. He'd seen men like Jade before, noise and arrogance, mistaking bluster for strength. They always had to learn the hard way. His voice cut through the silence, clean and sharp. "Your move, kid." Jade roared and threw a punch aimed straight for George's jaw. A wild swing meant to end things fast, but the fist hit nothing but air. In a single, fluid motion, George had sidestepped, using Jade's own momentum against him. As Jade stumbled forward, off balance, George grabbed a heavy glass coffee pot from the warmer behind him and brought it down hard on the back of Jade's head. The pot shattered, sending hot coffee and glass flying. Jade collapsed to the floor. With a grunt, stunned, the entire diner gasped. Before the other bikers could react, George spun around, grabbing a metal tray from the counter. The first biker lunged with a knife, his attack reckless. George used the tray as a shield, deflecting the wild slash. The sound of steel scraping against steel rang through the room. Then he slammed the edge of the tray into the man's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, and a sharp jab with the tray to the man's throat sent him down, gasping for air. "First rule," George muttered, his voice calm. "Don't bring a knife to a brunch fight." The others hesitated. The man they'd mocked, as a pretty boy, had just taken down two of them in seconds using nothing but diner supplies. Fear began to creep in, but pride and adrenaline pushed them forward. Two rushed him at once. George was a blur of motion. He ducked under a clumsy swing, kicked a chair into the path of the second man, sending him tumbling. As the first biker recovered, George grabbed a full ketchup bottle from a nearby table and smashed it against the man's head. The man went down in a heap. The diner had erupted into chaos. Tables were overturned. Broken glass littered the floor. The remaining patrons were pressed against the walls, watching in stunned silence as George Clooney methodically and creatively dismantled the biker gang. Jade struggled to his feet, blood matting his hair, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. This wasn't happening. He wiped his hand across his mouth and snarled, "Get him! Take him down!" The last two bikers hesitated. Their leader was giving an order, but their confidence was gone. One of them, a wiry man with tattoos up his neck, licked his lips. "Man, this ain't worth it," he muttered. George's voice cut through the tension. "You want to end up like them?" His tone was steady, almost casual. "Be my guest." The two men exchanged a look, and whatever bravado they had left evaporated. Without a word, they turned and bolted for the door, disappearing into the night. Now it was just Jade. He stumbled backward, his bravado gone, replaced by a dawning horror. He jabbed a trembling finger at George. "You're going to regret this, old man," he rasped. "You don't know who you're messing with." George took a single step forward. Jade flinched. "Walk away," George said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "before you embarrass yourself any more than you already have." For a second, Jade looked like he might try one last act of defiance. But the fight was gone from his eyes. With a grunt of pain and humiliation, he turned and staggered out the door. It slammed shut behind him, leaving a heavy silence in the ruined diner. Betty slowly emerged from behind the counter, her eyes wide. Are you okay?" George smoothed down his jacket, a wry smile touching his lips as he looked at the chaos. "I'm fine," he said simply. He turned to the stunned patrons. "Sorry for the mess. The coffee was on me anyway." The story isn't just about a brawl in a diner. It's about a different kind of strength. It's about respect, composure, and the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly who he is. George Clooney's character could have escalated things from the start, but he didn't. He gave them a chance to walk away, and that's what separates true strength from simple aggression. Jade and his gang aren't just one-dimensional villains. They're driven by pride and a need to project an image of toughness. That's the real lesson here. Unchecked pride makes you reckless. It pushes you into conflicts you can't win and leaves you broken when you collide with reality. George, on the other hand, has nothing to prove. His power comes from his composure. True strength isn't about being the loudest or the most intimidating person in the room. It's about being the smartest, staying calm under pressure, and letting your actions speak for themselves. So, what did you think? What was your favorite part of the takedown? Let me know in the comments.